from the Crow, a limited part series based on true stories from your narrator. Check under the bed, turn the lights off, and prepare to have some nightmares. Welcome to Tales from the Crow. Welcome to Tales from the Crow. Thank you for joining me for episode 2. I hope I didn't scare you too much with episode 1. Tonight, I have even more terrifying tales from my horror vault for you. Stories of Deja Vu, Raggedy Ann, and haunted graves of a witch. As always, check under the bed, turn off the lights, and get ready for Tales from the Crow. This is Deja Vu. Devin and I have been friends for a long time. At this point, over 20 years. Now, this story takes place a long time ago. We were probably 11 or 12 at the time. We decided that we were going to go camping in the backyard at his place one weekend. So, my parents dropped me off after school, and Devin and I spent the rest of the daylight time messing around inside and packing up everything we wanted to take out with us that night. Now, at first, his mom was hesitant about letting us camp outside, but we finally convinced her. And so we went out just before dark and started setting up our tent. A little while later, when it was completely dark, we decided that we would head on out for the night. So we took our BB guns and snacks, the important stuff, out to the tent with us. We waited about 30 minutes before we saw the lights go off in the house, and we knew that the coast was clear. Of course, we never had any intentions on staying in the tent that night. Instead, we wanted to be outside so we could sneak out and go out into the woods to investigate and look for Bigfoot or ghosts. But what happened to us that night was more than we ever bargained for. I know to this day, Devin and I are both grateful for the deja vu that took place that night. But I'm getting way ahead of myself. So, Devin and I decide to leave the tent. We start our journey through the cornfield and made it up to the second level of cornfield and woods. When we reached this point, we heard a noise. Now, this wasn't a twig snapping or a growl. Instead, it was 3 voices. 3 human voices coming from the distance. We dug down beneath the corn that probably stood at least 7 feet tall anyways. And we listened. Now, it's worth noting before we go on that Devin and I were texting another friend of ours on his cell phone before we went out into the field. His friend's name was Courtney, and we'll come back to that in a minute. We heard one of the voices out in the distance say, "I think I heard someone." Devin and I looked at each other. I know my blood grew cold at this moment. Suddenly we heard them begin walking towards us. So we slowly started to crawl, trying to be as quiet as possible. Back down into the first level. Once we saw his house, we finally stood up and we began to run out. I felt Devin's phone in my pocket vibrate. I pulled it out and gave Devin a puzzled look. "What?" he said. "I don't know. I've got this weird feeling of deja vu. I don't know how to explain it, but the feeling isn't going away this time. If this is Courtney texting back with a smiley face, I'm going to be really freaked out." So I pulled out the phone and we looked at the text together. It was from Courtney, and it was just a smiley face. We ran out of the woods and went to the picnic table behind his house and sat there to gather our bearings for a moment. We didn't see or hear the guys anymore at this point, and so we just sat there and talked. The feeling of deja vu wasn't going away still. And so I told him, it's like I dreamt all of this before. He said, "Well, if that's the case, then what happened next?" I said, "Well, next I heard someone on the front porch. We could hear their footsteps, and then we heard them run down the steps and out into the gravel driveway. We ran back to see what the noise was, and we couldn't see anybody. So he kind of laughed, and we just sat there talking. When all of a sudden, we heard footsteps. Footsteps on the front porch, running down the stairs and out into the gravel driveway. We ran around the side of the house to the front and saw nothing. Devin slowly turned and looked at me. Both of our eyes widened. What happened next? I don't know. Let's go back to the picnic table so I can think about it, I told him. So we walked back, sat at the picnic table once more. Okay, so next we saw something fall from behind the shed. It's like a piece of siding or something, and as we started to walk towards it, something else happened. What happened? He asked. I don't know. I'm trying to remember. At this point, a piece of siding fell from behind the shed. Devin and I stood up and looked at each other. Devin started to walk towards it when I remembered the rest of the dream. I jumped up and ran and grabbed Devin by the back of the shirt and began to pull him back towards the house. Let's go see what that was. No. Wait, we gotta get inside right now. I told him. Once we got inside and back into his room, he asked me, "Why did you pull me back? We should have went and saw what that was." I remembered the rest of the dream, Devin. Okay, so what happened? In the dream, we saw the siding fall. And as we walked back, you were in front of me, and a man jumped out from behind the shed. He shot you and killed you. I had to run back inside and call the police and wake your parents up and tell them that you were killed. We sat there quietly for quite a while before we were finally able to go to sleep. The next morning, Devin and I walked out into the living room where his parents sat watching the news. To our horror, a story came on about three men that had escaped from the local jail. They were captured by police, near the woods, by Devin's house. If you take one thing away from this story tonight, always trust your deja vu. You never know when it may just save your life. This is Mary Jane's grave. Every town has those local haunted legends that you're not quite sure if they're true or not. I grew up not too far from Mansfield, where one of those legends took place. The story was called Mary Jane's Grave. It was about a witch who was buried in a tree planted on top of her to make sure that she would be forever rooted underground, never to be free and cause havoc. There's a lot of variations within this legend of what exactly you need to do when visiting the location to see an apparition of Mary Jane or to be followed home by spirits. Even a more bizarre story about hellhounds and how they'll try to warn you if you're driving down the dirt road at night, trying to keep you from seeing Mary Jane. So, much like many other times in my life, I decided that I wanted to know if this was true or not. So with the help of my best friend, my cousin, and another family friend, we decided that we would go and crack the case of Mary Jane once and for all. We decided that we would go before sundown so that we could get familiar with the area where we would be when it was pitch black. Upon arriving, it was raining, so Devin and I decided that we would be the ones to get out and scope the area. As we stepped out of the van, we could see the lone tree. There was even a plaque that told the story of the legend of Mary Jane. We read it, looked at the area, and decided that we were going to go deeper into the woods. As we made it a ways into the woods, we began to hear noises. Off in the distance, we then saw a kid playing behind a tree in a white dress. And Devin and I looked at each other as this was sort of odd. There was really no houses close by. So we turned around and decided that we were going to start heading back to the vehicle. We turned around to look at the kid one last time, and to our horror, saw as they shifted from one tree to another, almost as if there was some sort of portal we couldn't see. The child just kept getting closer and peering out from behind the trees. Devin and I now were in a dead sprint back to the vehicle, screaming to start the vehicle. As we made it back, Lisa and Josh asked why we were freaking out. We told them that there was some kind of kid that was just appearing behind trees in the woods. We were amazed that even in the daylight there was already activity happening. But we laughed it off, and we left and went to get food and waited until dark. Just as the sun almost left the sky completely, we made it back to Mary Jane's grave. We began setting up equipment, getting our cameras ready, and went out to the tree. For a while, nothing really happened. We carved our initials in the trees, and we did everything that all the stories said that you needed to do. But nothing was happening. At least, not that we were seeing at the time. We grew tired of nothing happening, and so we decided it best to pack up and to head home. As we got into the van, I decided to keep rolling on my video. As we backed out, I saw my screen turn white I thought it was odd, but I said we'll check it out later. We got the vehicle turned around and started heading down the long dirt road back to the main road. As we got to the stop sign at the very end, we all remembered the hellhounds. We never tried going down the dirt road when it was dark towards Mary Jane's grave. It was still somewhat light out. We begged Josh to turn around. At first, reluctant, he finally decided to turn around. As we began our journey back down the long dirt road, out of nowhere, we heard barking. We all began to look at each other and laugh. There's no way this is happening right now. The barks got closer and closer. Before we knew it, the car was covered in dogs. We could see the dogs, we could hear the dogs barking and clawing and jumping. I frantically threw the camera around in all angles, just desperately trying to capture an image of these dogs. As quickly as they had arrived, the hounds disappeared. We made it back to Mary Jane's grave and turned around once more, heading back to the main road. On the way out, nothing happened. When we made it to the stop sign at the end, we all knew what we had to do. We had to turn around one more time and make sure that this wasn't a fluke. Make sure that we really saw and heard what just happened. So one more time, we turned the vehicle around and headed down the dirt road. And once again, halfway down, we were met by a swarm of dogs all over the vehicle, scratching and barking. Our laughter filled us once more as we could see the dogs and knew that we caught them on video. Or so we thought. Upon arriving back home, we plugged in my camcorder and began watching all the footage that we had taken that night. And just as we thought, there was nothing that we caught while we were at Mary Jane's grave. However, the first time that we were leaving Mary Jane's grave that night, as we were backing out, on video we caught an apparition floating in front of the vehicle holding a lantern. And as we first began to drive and my screen turned white, there was a face of an old woman that took over the entire screen. We immediately shut the video off and tried to come to our senses. This has to be paranoia. There's no way that's what we just saw. So I rewind the video and we watch again. Just as we saw the first time, an apparition holding a lantern floated by the screen. And then the entirety of the screen was overtaken by a sunken face of an old woman. The video continues as we were at the stop sign turning around to try to capture the hellhounds. Now, as I said before, we saw these hounds with our own eyes, and we're excited because we knew that we had captured them on video. To our horror, as we play the video back, we can't see anything. All you can hear is the bark and yelp of what sounds like hundreds of dogs scratching all over the exterior of the vehicle. This is Raggedy Man. When I was 4 and my brother 7, we were playing Super Nintendo one day. We were playing for at least a couple hours when we heard a familiar voice come from the bottom of the spiral staircase that led to my brother's room.
Zach, Jeff, come here.
We looked at each other and slowly walked over to the top of the stairs, peeking our heads down and around. To our surprise, it was our mom at the bottom of the stairs. But she looked different. She was wearing a sack over her head. What looked like an old-fashioned potato sack, but it was sort of see-through. And we could see that our mom was wearing a bunch of blush, making her cheeks very, very red, almost like a Raggedy Ann doll.
Come on, guys. Let's play a game. I've got these pillows here. We can throw them at each other.
My brother and I were really confused because these were Mom's nice, antique pillows. But she began throwing them up the stairs at us, so we had fun with our long-range pillow fight for a while. Before suddenly, Mother said,
"Oh, sorry, guys. I need to get going. You guys go play."
So we walked back towards my brother's room and continued playing Super Nintendo until that night. We went down for dinner. We told Mom that we had so much fun playing before. To which my mom looked very confused as she asked us what we were talking about. As my mom puts it, she was busy cleaning and never came over and played. Why would I waste that much blush? And where would I have a sack to put over my head? And why would I throw my antique pillows up the stairs at you boys? To this day, my brother and I don't know who that really was at the bottom of the stairs that day. If it wasn't our mom, then who was it? Thank you for joining me tonight for episode 2. I hope you enjoyed tonight's tales, and I hope you'll join us one last time on October 29th for the final part of this limited part series. Part 3 is sure to bring even more spine-tingling tales from my personal horror vault, and one tale that still bothers me to this day. We'll see you on October 29th for the last installment of Tales from the Crow.